second chance in the game.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Lance Hoeltke. I'm the receivers coach at Christian Academy of Louisville here in Kentucky. And today I want to present to you a little bit about wide receiver fundamentals and development. Now, most presentations that are position specific want to focus on stance to start with, and thought I'd flip the script a little bit here. And given the attraction to the receiver position is all about catching the ball, that we would start with the art of catching. And I believe that receiving the ball is an art form, and it can be improved, it can be worked on, and it can be developed if taught properly. Now, there's many ways to teach it. I'm going to apply some of my philosophies here to the presentation, and hopefully you're able to glean some insights or maybe a couple of ideas that you can incorporate into your work with your respective receiving core. So I'm going to lead with the more enjoyable part of the fundamentals of playing receiver, and that, of course, is getting a chance to catch the ball. Another reason why I'm going to lead with this slide is an old pet peeve that my dad had. He was a high school receivers coach in Florida for many years, and the one thing that he never failed to point out to me is what happens all across the country at really every level when a young man drops a pass, particularly in practice. Almost without fail, you're going to hear at least one coach yell out, "Catch the ball!" All right? Dang it, catch the ball. And unfortunately, there's not 1 ounce of constructive feedback contained within that reaction. It's a very natural reaction. I think we've all done it. I know I have. But there's better ways to capture that moment and make it a more teachable moment with your receiving core so that they can benefit from that situation through your coaching rather than just yelling at them and telling them to catch the ball. Are there some constructive elements that we can give them that are going to, 1, boost their confidence, and 2, give them something that they can apply to their game, all right, or their technique, so that in future situations when they run into that same situation, they improve their chances of success in bringing the ball in the next time around. So some of the part of the spirit of leading with this aspect of the position. So I've categorized this into 5 elements. There's nothing magical about this. It's just one way that I chose to present the information. Head and eyes, your body position and your adjustments to the football before it arrives, your hand placement, the actual receiving of the ball, and then finishing and ball security, which we all know is so important. All right, so head and eyes. Most route breaks, your head's going to lead you out of the turn. There are some exceptions to that. If I'm running a deep route, I'm going to set an angle first, okay, and then turn. Or perhaps there's certain crossing patterns or other types of routes where I'm trying to clear some traffic, or I'm trying to get to the other side of the formation, and then I'm going to turn and look for the ball. But with those exceptions aside, most of your route tree is going to require the head to lead you out of the break. Now, on that note, I've also seen athletes who turn the head early, all right, before the route break. That's another thing that we do not want to do, all right? That's going to throw off the timing of the route, the rhythm of the route. It's going to tip off the defender as to where you're trying to get before you want to give them any tip as to where you're going. And so not too early, not too late, but right at the point of your route break is where you want the head to lead you out of the break so that you can get a jump on locating the ball. Obviously, the next component is the eyes and locating either the passer, all right, and seeing the ball come off of his hand, or locating the ball if it's already in flight as quickly as you possibly can. I've heard this term used a few times over the years, but the first time I heard it was from an old receiver for the Eagles named Mike Quick. And he was a 5-time Pro Bowler. I think he played in the league 8 or 9 years. But he always said, catch the ball with your eyes first, then your hands. I think that's a very important concept that you want to teach to your kids. Not just looking in that general direction, not just look the ball into your hands. I think kids have heard that term for years, but actually catching the ball with your eyes, I think raises the stakes, creates just a different level of intensity and focus and concentration on that ball, that we're actually going to catch that ball with our eyes. We're going to track that ball all the way through to the tuck. And not to skip ahead here, but when we do catch the ball with our eyes, That means we are locked in on that ball, and just like a great outfielder who can get a beat on where he needs to be, all right, in baseball based on the trajectory of the ball, the velocity of the ball, where it's headed, all right, by engaging and zeroing in on that ball with their eyes, it's also going to allow you to set the tone of seeing that ball all the way through to the catch and not leaving the ball with your eyes until that ball is securely fashioned, but more to come on that. Another little concept that I learned from my dad, he said, you know, to try to conceptualize this is to bore a hole through that ball with your eyes. Think of Superman. He said you actually want to burn a hole right through that ball with your eyes if you can envision that. And so I think some of these ways of explaining the importance of the head turn and the actual eyes on the ball just as quickly as you can, all the way through to the tuck, are pretty important components in optimizing your chances of success when you get a ball thrown to you. All right, so the next component or element that I would touch on here is your body position and adjustments. So if you can see where the ball is going, now you can adjust accordingly. And I would translate this all the way to the beginning of each practice when you're warming up. I despise guys who are standing very lazily, catching the ball, okay? Maybe shifting a hip to one side or their legs are too close together. I always want, even when guys are warming up, all right, I want people in an athletic stance. I want them ready to react to whatever their eyes are telling them, because we're not going to have the luxury of always catching the ball right here at our chin, all right? Anybody can catch these, all right? But being in a position where we can use that information that our eyes are giving us by reacting accordingly and getting our bodies in the right position. So one of the ways in which you can adjust to a pass is simply by squaring up, all right? So much like a basketball player would body out a defender, all right, and make themselves a big target and optimize their chance of getting their hands on the ball, we want to square up to as many passes as we can whenever possible, particularly with any kind of a route break that's working back to the quarterback, all right, gives us a chance. Hitch, curl are great examples where when we come out of that route break, a lot of guys, they don't fully turn, all right? Torso might even turn, but you got to get the feet, everything fully around so that we can square up to the pass and we can adjust accordingly. We're not just favoring one side where, okay, the ball's thrown inside, that's an easy one. Ball might be thrown back outside, how am I going to get to it? Well, to optimize your chance of success by squaring up, all right, now it really doesn't matter where the ball is thrown. We're just in a better athletic position that we can get to a point where we can make the catch a little more securely and successfully. Foot in the ground, that term's used all the time when you're carrying the ball, okay, in terms of making cuts and making adjustments based on what you're seeing. What I mean by foot in the ground is putting your foot in the ground when you see a ball that's thrown low or thrown behind you, all right, or thrown in a position where you're going to have to stop running your route to get to the ball. All too often I see guys, they'll be running an out-breaking or in-breaking route, the ball's thrown behind them, and what do? They just kind of throw a paw out behind them and hope for the best. No, it takes a lot of energy, all right, and focus to do this, but the minute you notice that ball's thrown behind you, you need to try to put the brakes on, put that foot in the ground, whether you're working out or in, and reverse your course so that you can get back and secure that catch, or at least improve your chances of success in securing that catch. Run, reach. I'm sure many receivers coaches have heard this term before. We don't want to be like Charlie Brown running with our arms out into the air. This is particularly important when we're trying to track the deep ball. So if the ball is perceived to be overthrown, all right, as we're tracking it, we don't want to give ourselves up and start reaching for the ball too early. We want to put it in that sixth gear, all right, so to speak, and get as many arm pumps in as we can before we reach for the ball. We want to reach for the ball at the very last second. We want to leave our feet at the very last second. All right, we want to focus more on the emphasis of running and tracking the ball as best we can before we resort to reaching out to try to make the catch, and that, again, is a way that we can adjust our body, all right, and put ourselves in the most optimal position possible to secure the catch given the situation. All right, elevating and timing. So a lot of this can be done just through basic experiences, okay, and understanding where a defender is, where the ball is thrown. All right, there's a time to leave your feet. There's a time not to leave your feet. If the ball is thrown in an area where you do not have to leave your feet, a lot of guys do that. I think it's just a way psychologically for them to cushion the pass, all right? It becomes a very bad habit. You don't want to leave your feet if you don't have to. Stay grounded, all right? And don't leave your feet unless you have to. Now, when you do leave your feet, obviously you want to, if a ball is underthrown per se and I'm working down the sideline, I want to gather first. I don't just want to jump off one foot. I want to gather and get as much body position and control as I can before I go up. I want to go up with 2 feet if I can help it. I want to go up with 2 hands if I can help it, if I'm trying to high point a football. And so, like a great rebounder, it doesn't really matter what your vertical is, if you're jumping too early or too late, all right? You want to be quick off the ground, but you want to be coming off the ground at the right time to optimize your chance of getting your hands on that football. So that's what I'm referring to in terms of your elevation and your timing, or when not to elevate. Going to the ground to secure a catch. So I put that in there because what I tell my kids is, look, unless it's 4th and gotta have it and you're not beyond the sticks, or it's the last play of the game, don't try to make a brilliant catch while staying up. All right? If you've got to go to the ground to secure that catch, I'd much rather have 2nd and 7 or 2nd and 6, all right, and staying ahead of the chains than trying to do too much and stay on your feet and drop the ball and come back 2nd and 10. So if the ball is poorly thrown, or if the ball is thrown in a position where you've got to go down, or you've got to give yourself up in order to make sure that you have the ball, all right, then I encourage our kids to do that. Okay, hand placement. So these are simple concepts, but they're things that really need to be emphasized. Guys get their fingers jammed up all the time because they get a little lazy with these types of techniques. Guys will drop balls because of some of the lack of dedication to these types of techniques. So we want to spread our fingers wide, all right? And these are things that you can condition as well. I think if you're constantly emphasizing making your hands a big target, all right, by spreading these fingers, I think you can stretch this stuff out, much like learning how to palm a basketball, all right? You build up some flexibility and strength in your hands, all right? Spreading your fingers wide, touching the index finger and thumbs together so that you can optimize catching the fatty part of the ball, all right, whenever possible, all right, and bringing the ball in. If the ball is thrown over your shoulder, if it's a level 3 ball, all right, and there's a higher trajectory of that ball, I teach the kids to roll their thumbs out. Now the pinkies come together. We always want to make sure that we're touching here, okay? We never want to close. This adds an additional element of complexity to the catch if you're trying to stab at a football. Now, there are times where you may not get there in time, and so you are stabbing at the football. But if you can be there, all right, with your hands in the optimal position before the ball arrives, that's ideal, all right? So we want to get our hands to a place where the ball is headed, all right, before it gets there, and we want to make sure we're either touching pinkies or we're touching thumbs and index fingers based on what's going on. Now, if the ball's thrown kind of in that tweener, like you got a level 3 ball, you're rolling your thumbs out, you got a ball below your waist, you're rolling your thumbs out. Similarly to Julio down here in the picture at the bottom of the screen. If the ball's kind of in that no man's land, I kind of like lowering the hips and maintaining this, because I think it's easier to catch a ball with index finger and thumb than it is to roll out. But if the ball is so far below the waist that you can't get your hands in that position, then of course that's the next course of action, is to make that adjustment as demonstrated here. One-hand catch is a last resort. I put that in there because our game has gotten so one-hand catch happy with the Odell Beckham Juniors of the world, and they're brilliant catches and they're fun to watch and they make great highlight reels. And of course there's always opportunities for you to make a one-handed catch or attempt a one-handed catch, but I feel like today's receiver is resorting to that tactic far too early and often, and it diminishes your chances of making the catch altogether. So what do you want to do? Well, you want to use 2 hands whenever possible, and only put that one hand out there when you have no other option but to attempt a one-handed catch based on, you know, how your body's contorted or which arm is tied up or where the ball has been thrown. Otherwise, Don't be pretty, don't be cute, be good. As Jimmy Johnson once said, reach out, catch the ball with 2. You'll be a better pass receiver. You'll be more successful. Okay, so then you have the actual receiving of the ball, and these are just a couple of techniques and some verbiage that I use. There are times where you're going to want to body the ball up. We don't want to be so rigid in our technique that we don't do what might be most appropriate in that situation. If I'm in traffic, I might want to body the ball. If the ball's thrown into my gut on a slant or a dig route, and I can absorb that into the softer part of my body and cover it up, then I want to take advantage of doing that. I don't always have to reach out away from my body. But if the ball runs any risk of hitting my pads, the harder parts of my gear here, then I want to reach out away from my body as much as possible. I want to reduce the amount of time the ball is in the air, all right? That, of course, prevents the defensive player of getting their hands on the ball before I do, all right? It also allows me to get my hands on the ball quicker so that I can react quicker when the defense is pursuing. But I want to reach out, and then lastly, when receiving the ball, reaching out allows me to absorb, and I like that term, absorb the ball. I tell my kids all the time, you ever been in an egg toss or a water balloon toss, where if you just try to stop that thing right there as it's coming at you, you're going to break it, okay? You want to give, you want to absorb. In order to absorb, you've got to create a little bit of room with which to absorb from. And so subsequently, we're reaching out away from our body for all of those reasons, and we're absorbing the ball. And I put with movement, and then I added this term breath. And this is another thing that I had learned from my dad, and he taught the importance of incorporating the breath into the catch. And it works like a charm. If you're tight, all right, and you're working hard to get open, and you're competing, and here comes the ball, and you're fighting, it's hard to make your hands soft. But if the minute that ball arrives, as it touches your hand, if you exhale, if you push that breath out, and I try to get my kids to do that even in warm-ups, just to condition that behavior and make it second nature, it softens your hands right up. It works wonderfully well, and I try to get the kids to do this in addition to all the other physical techniques, is adding the breath component. It loosens the jaw, and anybody who has a background in track and field, they always talk about relaxing the jaw. That relaxes the shoulders, all right? Keeping the mouth loose and focusing on that breath and timing the rhythm of that breath in with whatever it is that you're doing. It's going to make you a better athlete, make you a more coordinated athlete. It's going to conserve a lot of energy as well over the course of a game. So staying relaxed in here, pushing that breath out as you're absorbing the ball, I encourage you to try it. All right, just as that ball hits the hands, softens them right up. All right, so finishing and ball security. And I see this all the time. Guy makes a beautiful catch, makes a couple guys miss, has a highlight in the making. Right at the end of the play, maybe trying to do too much, maybe loses sight of the pursuit, maybe gets a little too loose with the football, gets punched out, turnover, and it's all for naught. And so it's vitally important that we see the ball all the way through to the tuck, that we carry the ball properly, the same way a running back would be taught ball security. We want to incorporate those same techniques, all right? We want to make sure that we're finishing play with a focus on protecting the ball, all right? So we lock in those gains, all right? So just to kind of reiterate, using some of these bullets here that I've created, all right, quickly putting the ball away. So again, back to the warm-up, all right? Once practice has begun, I understand framing the ball and kind of emphasizing these different components of the catch. But what I want my guys to do is I want them to make it all one motion, all right? So as I'm absorbing the ball, I'm seeing it all the way through the tuck. If you watch your guys closely, you'll see so many of them, they may be watching the ball, but as soon as they bring it to the tuck, they're just looking in that general direction of where they caught the ball. Or if they look down, they're just looking down. Their eyes are not boring a hole through that ball all the way to the tuck. And the quicker you can do this, the quicker you can make a football move and do something with the ball after the catch, but not before. And it's so vitally important that guys see it through to the tuck as quickly as possible. It should be one fluid movement so they don't get their arms raked or the ball punched out, all right, and negate a good catch, okay? So putting the ball away quickly, but practicing putting the ball away quickly and not being so deliberate in practice that you're catching it and then you're just kind of lazily putting it away. No, catch it, put it away, catch it, put it away. And using the offhand, all right? Guys are going to use their dominant hand just by nature, all right? They're more confident. We want guys to do ratio of 2 to 1, all right? If you can help it, 2 to 1 into the offhand. Much like a basketball player working on that offhand, you got to be able to do that as a receiver as well and carry the ball in the most appropriate hand based on where you end up on the field after the catch. I never teach the guys to switch hands during the course of a play, all right, unless you are all by yourself and you found yourself on the other side of the field and you can do it, all right? Otherwise, do not. When in doubt, just keep the ball in the same hand, okay? 3 points of pressure. Now, there's some good examples here in the pictures that I chose to put in the slide, all right? I see a lot of guys like the receiver here at the bottom of the screen. They put that index finger over the point of the ball. I teach split finger over the nose, okay, like an eagle claw over the nose of the ball. I just think it gives that much more stability on the point up against the forearm, all right, but not underneath the ball. A lot of guys put the forearm under the ball, so there's a point of pressure, but ideally it needs to be on the outside of the football, okay, and then closing the window with the elbow, all right, and then pinning across the chest high and tight, all right. So having those points of pressure and making sure we're taking super good care of the football. Tight turns and getting north, all right. So now we're kind of transitioning into how we're finishing a play, all right. Another thing that we try to keep our kids from doing is getting too engaged with the defender immediately in front of them, okay, where we're dancing and we're trying to do too much and we're not getting as much out of the play as we could, all right. We teach running backs to run to get 4 yards, all right, and then do what comes naturally to you. If you break through that threshold, want to adopt some of the same concepts as a receiver, okay. Get the ball, make sure it's securely fashioned, and then we want to get north, all right. There's nothing worse than a guy catching a slant route. Here comes the pursuit from the inside out. It's very easy to avoid them by crossing their face because of the manner in which they're pursuing us, okay? So we avoid one guy that way, we avoid another guy that way, and the next thing you know, we're getting tackled or we're getting destroyed by defensive linemen pursuing the play from behind the play, and we get a 2-yard gain instead of a 7-yard gain. So get what you can, get north. Now, if there's a situation where you absolutely have to avoid a guy laterally, yeah, avoid him. Then get north immediately. When we catch our hitches or outside breaking routes, we want a tight turn outside away from the pursuit whenever possible, okay? And we want to use stiff arm, we want to swat hands off of us if we can, but taking the defender by surprise by immediately making a football move up the field, all right, and doing those things tightly will create a lot of arm tackles or poorly executed tackles and allow us to rip through them and get down the field. Now, if we're in a situation where there's a lot of traffic or we're at the end of a run, all right, I used to teach double clutch. All right, after further review, that ball moves too much when you do that. I don't like that anymore. All right, you want to go ahead and keep that ball high and tight. Cover the fat part of the ball with your offhand, all right, as best you can, all right, and protect that thing on the way down. Again, it happens all too often. You're a little fatigued, you're a little disoriented, that elbow pops open, ball comes loose, you get hit the wrong way. As you're securing that ball, you feel like it's the end of the play, or you feel like you need to protect the ball because of all the bodies around you, just cover that thing up with the offhand. All right, now you got 2 hands on the ball. Okay, next we want to talk about stance. All right, something I probably should have led with here in this presentation, but let's talk about stance for a second. And I've tried to give some illustrations here to help guide a conversation about stance, all right, that we can point out, but in no particular order. Obviously, we want to have our our inside foot up, okay, outside foot back. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There's certain snag route concepts and other things that we may do that, we'll give the kids permission to switch their feet up now and again. But for the most part, all right, the outside foot is back, okay, and we want 80% of the weight over the front foot, all right, and we want the knee over the toe, chest over the knee. Now, I used to teach shoulders down and really loading up by getting low, and in studying sprinters, and the optimal trajectory of coming out of blocks is 45 degrees, okay, from your top of your head through your heels. And so really that's what we're aiming for, is good weight distribution out over the front foot and body mechanics that kind of simulate that 45-degree angle whenever possible. All right, see a lot of guys stand up way too straight when they're in their receiver stance, and what has to happen? Well, now they've got to lean forward or they've got to sink hips before they can go out. Back to what I originally taught, where the stance is too low, all right, now you got to raise up. So you want to be in that optimal stance. I tell the kids load up, which teaches them to get plenty of weight, 80% thereabouts over that front foot, all right? So we're rolling off that front foot and we're being explosive off the ball, okay? Very important. Now, here's some things that I see all the time with the kids. The depth of the back foot is too far back. Now, I can't tell you an optimal depth. It's really relative to the length of the kid, the height of the kid, okay? But it has to be something that's comfortable, all right, that they can get a good get off through, okay? We don't want so much depth between our stance that we really can't take that first step optimally, all right? Another thing that I see kids do so often is they'll tuck that back foot directly behind the front foot, all right? They've got no balance and foundation there in their stance. Their stance should be comfortable. Their feet should be the width of their hips. Whatever their running gait is, that should be the width of their stance. All 10 toes and both knees should point straight ahead. I see all the time kids will contort their feet and their knees, or their both feet are pointed kind of angularly towards the sideline. I want everything pointing straight ahead. I don't want to give any tips. I don't want anything awkward. I don't want anything to disrupt applying a vertical takeoff that looks the same every time. And some of that takes some conditioning when kids have developed certain habits as to how they get into their stance. The back heel. We don't want the back heel so high up off the ground that there's not enough surface area that we can get a good push. The back heel really only needs to be an inch or two off the ground, so we've got plenty of surface area on the back foot so we can push. We really want to push with both feet, all right? We're kind of driving off that front foot, which also helps prevent false steps. False step is when that front foot moves before the back foot does. We don't want to do that, all right? Whether you're picking it up or sliding it back or inching it forward, we want to eliminate all false steps. We want to be as efficient as we can be when we're coming off of the line of scrimmage. Heads inside, we're always looking at the ball. One of my pet peeves is receivers never jump off sides, and when they say, well, I thought the count was on one, wrong answer. You should never listen to the snap count when you're a wide receiver. You should look at the ball. When the ball wiggles, you go. And I try to joke with the kids sometimes and tell them, you know, when there's going to be 70,000 fans at our game this Friday night, you're not going to be able to hear the snap count. But looking in, all right, hands are above the waist, okay? Hands, again, we don't want to swing the hands here. And I see guys at all levels who do it different ways, but this is how we teach, all right? You want your hands in a way that's going to be very efficient for when you do go to take that first step and you start to get into your running gait, all right? You don't want to have to bring your hands up. You don't want to have to lower your hands to start your takeoff. You want your hands right around that waistline, all right? So you're in an optimal position to go out and begin your route or begin your stem or begin your assignment in blocking a defender as much as possible. Now, we rarely see press coverage. But there was a time a few years back where a team surprised us. They walked up in press, and we weren't prepared. We didn't coach the kids up very well that week on that particular style of coverage, and they gave us fits all night. Then we prepared the remaining weeks of the season, never saw it again. So I guess the goal is, or the moral of that story is to always be prepared. But in the event a guy walks up, wants to play press man, all right, now we're going to shorten up that back foot, all right, and we're going to go ahead and raise into what Urban Meyer calls more of a boxer stance, okay? We can't be really laid out, committed over that front foot, focusing on takeoff as much as focusing on defeating that press coverage and quickly gaining leverage, getting that defender off of his grass, all right, so that we can get into our route stem as quickly as possible. So shortening the back leg, all right, raising up a little bit, and your hand's always above his hand. So they may need to come a little bit above the waist, because now first goal is to defeat this press technique that we're seeing before we get into our route stem. Some other things here that I listed, your proper alignment. So depending on the formation, depending on what route you're getting ready to run, depending on where the ball is with your field position. All right, the kids need to understand, all right, am I top of the numbers on this? Am I splitting the difference on this? Am I on the hash, off the hash? How far from the nearest tackle or tight end or wing am I lining up? Those things can vary exponentially, okay, so I didn't get into too much detail there, but just understanding the different places on the field, understanding the different landmarks on the field is very important before you even get into your stance. Checking in verbally and non-verbally. Even when we're running plays on air, I tell the kids always check in with the imaginary official, make it a good habit. Because if he says you're good, it really doesn't matter if you were on or off. If he said you're good, we're not going to get flagged. All right, so checking in verbally and non-verbally simply means on, sir, or off. All right, I want them to say that demonstratively to the official, get confirmation from the official that you're good. All right, whether you need to inch up, inch back, make sure he confirms that you're good. On, off, okay? Saying it, showing it, making sure there's no confusion with the side judge as to, whether I'm legal or not, okay? If we are off, I try to teach the receivers to push the envelope on that. Unless we're going in some type of jet mo here or motion through the formation, all right, we don't need to be 3 yards off the ball. We want to be half a foot off the ball if we can get away with it, all right? And it's up to the official to inch us back, and if he says back up, we want to inch back until he tells us that we're good, all right? We don't want to give up that valuable real estate that we're just going to need to pass to get back across the line of scrimmage. So very important, pushing the envelope. Even when we're off, we're just slightly off the line of scrimmage. Same stance, same everything applies. Once we break the huddle, sprint to our landmark, understand where we're lining up, alignment, assignment, technique, all that good stuff. We're in our stance, we're looking in at the ball. Now we want to peek out into the coverage, try to understand the roof line of the coverage, who the force player is, where linebackers are playing, how the corner is playing us. Try to quickly decipher, all right, what it is that we're about to see pre-snap to the best of our ability to give ourselves an advantage as to what we might need to do once the ball is snapped. So by getting out there and getting lined up quickly, you give yourself an opportunity to do that. And we have normally the longest way to go. So even more important to have a sense of urgency to get out there, not be rocking back and forth and lining up and fixing our feet. Man, the minute we get to our landmark, we want to be able to instantly get into our stance, all right, so that we can look in at the ball and then quickly glance out and see what's going on with the defense. Okay, kind of building on that understanding of the defense, the better you know coverages, the better your kids know coverages, the more effective they're going to be as receivers. Okay, so first thing I need to know is, where are my threats? What is the defense trying to do? Are they trying to funnel me inside? All right, are they trying to disrupt me at the line of scrimmage? Are they trying to prevent the deep ball over the top? Where's their help? Where's the flat defender? Are they rolling coverage? All these things are concepts that you can talk about from week to week in helping the player become a smarter player and a more savvy player in understanding that coverage, because it goes hand in hand with how you're going to start and how you're going to release. We talk about leverage, okay? Ideally, if it's an in-breaking route, we want to gain inside leverage on the defender, whether he's playing close or whether he's playing off, whether it's man or zone. We want to understand where we can gain that leverage on an inside breaking route, and if it's an outside breaking route, where we can gain leverage on the outside, okay? If it's a deep route, how are we going to stack this guy? So if there's an opportunity, all right, with a guy who's playing more aggressively, or if a guy who is walked up press, okay, once we get him off his grass, once we clear his hip, all right, it's not enough to just make it a foot race. We want to try to stack this guy, all right, and get our body in front of him as best we can to create lots of different throwing windows for the quarterback, okay? And also, if there is some type of additional move that's incorporated off the route stem, if we are able to successfully stack that defender, then the head fake and the shoulder turn, all those little nuances of running the route are even that much more effective. It's so hard because the guy's not on my hip anymore. It's extremely difficult for them to guard a man who's making those kind of moves and running those kind of routes from a trailing position. So understanding the coverage, gaining leverage, and then your route precision, your timing, your depth, your location, all these things are part of your start and release. So if a guy's playing off of me, all right, first thing I always want to try to do is put pressure on that defender, all right? So we want to make it look the same those first 3 steps, and that's a good get off, put pressure on that defender, get him in a back pedal, all right, get him in a turn if we can, if at all possible, okay? Always putting pressure on the defense with those first 3 steps, all right? The depth, if a guy's playing more aggressively with me, even if it's just a cover 3, if he's playing a tougher cover 3, I've seen many a time where our kids will cut their routes short, okay, because they're trying to create that spacing or maintain that spacing by running a shorter route, but they're throwing off the timing of that route, okay, and they're throwing off the whole concept of that route combination. All right, if a guy doesn't respect you, okay, then we need to go ahead and get a release, okay, and get those hips turned and dictate what we're doing versus letting them dictate when we break, when we don't break, okay? So understanding the depth of your route, whether they're playing off or press, is vitally important. Now, with that in mind, if a guy is walked up and press, the first thing that we have to do is get him off of his grass, all right, depending on how aggressively he's playing that press coverage. So there's lots of different techniques for defeating press coverage at the line of scrimmage in terms of moves and steps. What I typically tell our kids is first thing we want to do is we want to come to balance. Okay, so coming to balance simply means bringing that back foot up next to our front foot, and then we can make moves, all right? Might be a double move, all right? We give them a jab and we release outside, all right? It might be a triple move where it's in, or out, in, out, all right? Really emphasizing the opposite step of where we're ultimately trying to go, get that defender off his grass. And then a couple of techniques here with our hands, once we do that with our feet, is either a single hand club, all right, tight. I don't like the swim. I think it just exposes too much of this, all right? So really tight single hand club, or some type of a swat and rip movement when we're ready to clear that defender, all right? We can't be just swinging at air. We don't want to aim for the shoulder. We don't want to aim for the hand because we may miss. We want to be very precise in where our aiming point is when we're trying to be physical with a defender. And so we want to try to aim for that elbow. That's from the outside in, that's the weaker part of the athlete's arm. And it's also enough surface area where we got a good chance at getting some contact on that. So I want to do that with a lot of physicality. And I think the previous slide showed the guy holding the pads, or maybe it's a dummy that you put, stand-up dummy in front of the receiver, but really making sure that you simulate some drills where they can be physical with that club, or from on the other side here, in, out, in. I club hard, and then I rip through. Okay, now once I make that move with my hands, now I want to get hip to hip, all right, and I want to lean into that defender, and I want to dictate where I'm trying to go. So it's one thing to influence the defender with the move, all right, and then use those hands, all right, and battle to go ahead and clear that defender. Now we got to try to maintain the leverage that we've created, because we may get outside, but if we get washed all the way to the sideline, then there's no more room left to make that outbreak. Or if we are run and dig and we get inside and we get washed too far inside, now we're going to end up getting covered up by someone else in a pass drop, or someone else that could affect the trajectory of the throw. So once I make my move, I use my hands, I get hip to hip. Now I want to establish that leverage. I want to be firm, okay, with staying true to my route stem before it's time for me to make my route break. And all of these things are, obviously areas that we want to emphasize when we're in practice and we're going up against guys that are trying to play us physical like that. Okay, so let's move on to the top of the route. And obviously all of the elements of route running are important. This is where you make your money as a receiver, and you don't have to be a spectacular athlete to get open. If you can get open by optimizing the top of your route, then you're going to be a successful receiver. So you're covered, you separate from the defender when the ball arrives, you make the catch. and you're productive in that regard. All right, so when we're talking about the top of the route, kind of broke this down into a couple of categories of the route tree. If it's a 90s game, three-step game, all right, it's really about threatening the defender, okay, all right, making them respect us, getting that head around quickly, identifying the ball, making the catch, getting what you can after the catch, finishing the play, okay? So back to some of the things that I talked about earlier with making sure you get that head around quick, eyes on the ball, locate the ball, should oftentimes be in the air, all right, by the time you turn when it is a 90s type throwing game, and making sure that you get your body all the way around so you can work back to the ball, you can protect the ball, you can adjust to the ball accordingly. Now if it's an intermediate route, all right, and it's more about what I spoke about earlier here with the releases, all right, and the different techniques incorporated into getting your leverage, all right, getting that hip transition where we clear their hip with ours, okay, making sure that we stay true to our stem once we do get vertical, all right, we don't let them wash us one way or the other and eat up all of our throwing space when we do come out of that route break. Now, when we get to the top of that route break, now there's a hip transition downward, okay, because to get maximum body control, the hips got to drop, and we say beat the drum, all right, so this is probably a very familiar term with a lot of receivers coaches out there, all right, we sink these hips, we beat the drum. I try to teach the kids to get some sound effects going because I think it helps with the rhythm and coordination, but we're at the top of the stem, we're going to go in, we're going to go out, it's da-da-da-da, all right, and then now we're getting into our route break and we're being very precise with our cuts and turns. But we were able to do that because we've gotten the body control from dropping the hips. So even if you're doing drills that aren't specific to receivers, any type of changing of direction should come with good sinking of the hips, good beating of the drum, because the feet will follow the hands if the hands are in rhythm, okay, and the hands are being put to good use, then the feet will follow, and that will increase the speed in which you transition out of those breaks. And then with the intermediate game, finding those windows. So we see a lot of zone coverage, all right, we get that head around. If that window is closed because there's a defender in the line of sight there or the throwing path with the quarterback, we want to quickly slide inside, slide back outside, find that easy window for the quarterback to get the ball to us, all right? So that's a component of the top of your route is once you've come out of that route break is, you know, finding those appropriate windows, you know, with the routes that allow you to do that. Okay, vertical path. So this is where there's some exceptions to getting that head turn right away. And what we teach is setting the angle and speed through the brakes before you get that head turn, okay? So whenever we're running any kind of a deep route, all right, one thing we never want to do is decelerate when it's time to look for the ball. We want to sprint through those brakes, maintain that separation and speed, and also optimize our chances of tracking that ball down that's being thrown out there with air for us to go run underneath, all right? In terms of setting the angle, okay, oftentimes if we're running a deep route, it's going to be post or corner, okay? So what I mean by setting that angle is if I'm working to get on that defender's toes, so if we're going post route, we want to threaten that defender over the top of us. We want to get onto his toes before we get in to our route break here, and our aiming point in post is typically the near upright, okay? When we go to plant off that outside foot, we don't want to decelerate, all right? We actually want to try to put it into another gear, all right, when we plant off that outside foot and we start heading to our ultimate landmark. Now, as we head to that ultimate landmark, we want to get 3 good hard steps in to set the angle, ensure that we're getting the most out of our acceleration phase here before we look for the ball, and then maintain that speed when we look for the ball. So often a guy, the minute he looks for the ball, starts to slow down. It takes some coordination and some practice to make sure that whatever you've built up to that point, you're keeping when it is time to look for the ball. Same thing if I'm running a corner route, okay? So if the ball's inside here and I'm sprinting to my landmark, which in the case of the corner route, unless it's man-to-man coverage, it's 6 or 8 yards, all right? We're planting off that inside foot and we're accelerating into the corner. We're setting a high angle so the quarterback can throw us open more downfield or over to the sideline if the situation calls for it, we're giving the quarterback that option by staying high with our angle, okay? So the aiming point is that pylon of the goal line, all right? So I'm here 6 to 8 yards. I stick off that inside foot. I set that high angle for 3 good hard steps, and then I maintain that speed and acceleration as I look over my shoulder and locate the ball. One other thing that I may not have touched on with regard to the intermediate game. So we use a term called reducing the throw. So of course, if you're running curls and hitches and other types of routes that cause you to work back towards the quarterback or retrace your steps, so to speak, of course, it's easy to emphasize that. On digs and out routes, we always want to reduce the throw. So number one, we've got to make sure our route depth accounts for that. So if it's 3rd and 6, we run a route that allows us to reduce the throw and still make the catch be on the sticks. But we want to reduce the amount of time that the ball's in the air. We want to maintain the separation and prevent the defender from undercutting us as much as possible. So if I'm running an out, like if I'm here and I'm running an out route, okay, and here comes the ball, I actually want to work back towards the line of scrimmage for a yard, yard and a half, and go get the ball. Oftentimes, guys won't reduce the throw because of a confidence issue. If they're waiting on the ball or even drifting away from the ball, that's a confidence issue with their ability to catch the ball. They want to go attack the ball, reduce the amount of time the ball's in the air, avoid the big hit. If you're running dig, let's say I'm here, boom, I'm running dig. If I start drifting, which is very natural result from a lot of high school receivers, they start drifting up the field, okay, they're going to get their bell rung by a deep safety here who's now recovering and working his way back to you as you're catching the ball. You actually want to reduce that throw and work back towards the line of scrimmage slightly to make that catch and maintain that space from defenders who are now breaking on you. Okay, I talked about vertical paths, and I didn't touch on double moves here. So double moves. So the precision in which you make the double move is every bit as important as every other component of the normal route tree. Okay, so it's not decelerate or raise up or do anything lazily, all right? We want to make sure that we run the first part of the double move with as much intensity as possible to simulate what it normally would be, all right? Whether it's an out and up or some type of bolt route or some type of slant and go, all right? If it's slant and go, for instance, all right? So we teach 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all right? So I load up my stance, good hard get off, 1, 2, 3. On that third step, I stick to the slant, all right, 45-degree angle. So it's boom, 1, 2, 3, boom, back off the inside foot, and then I'm vertical, okay? So the precision in which I do that is very important because obviously double moves take longer to execute. There's only so much time that the quarterback has to get the ball out of his hand, and so the precision in which you run it, the acceleration or intensity in which you run it are perhaps even more important than the regular route tree because of the increased amount of complexity and amount of time that it takes to complete that route. Your body language, obviously you've got to be able to sell what the route is supposed to look like. So there's a route that we use called the stutter route, all right? So it's meant to look like a semi or a curl where you're getting to a 10 to 12 yard depth, and then you're beating the drum, you're dropping your hips just like we taught, and you're working back towards the quarterback to make the catch. If it's a semi, we're simulating that, which means we need to accelerate, okay, into our route transition to make it look like a semi or curl. So hip transition, all right, good hard steps, shortening the steps, but accelerating the feet, beating the drum, bop, 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 all right, and then back, taking off again, all right, but not before. If we raise up or we're pretending like we're going to do that, we're just not putting enough pressure on the defensive player to bite on a route combination like that or on a double move like that, okay? Also, on double moves, it's not enough to sell the defender on that first cut. You must then avoid that defender in order to make the double move a success. A good defensive back is taught to collision you if he's beat, all right? So if it's an out and up and he's taking a good angle, okay, he sees you going up, he can, if he's a good defensive player, he can adjust just enough to collision you and disrupt your route when you're turning up the field. So as I make my out cut, so let's say I'm here, if I don't knock the podium over, boom. All right, I make my out cut, let's say 1, 2, 3, a little head turn. As I turn up the field, I must avoid him, all right? And I should be able to avoid him because he should be slightly out of control trying to break on that particular route, okay? And do the best that I can to make sure I don't draw any contact on that defender so that I can continue down the field and make the best out of the play, out of the opportunity. Okay, blocking. Now, I thought about putting blocking first, and I really mean that, but I didn't want to scare anybody off here. But I do tell my guys that if you can't block, then you can't play receiver for us. There has to be a certain element of pride that comes with blocking out there on the perimeter, and really the difference between a 20-yard gain and a 60-yard gain is often the performance of the blocking on the perimeter by the receiving core. And so we take a lot of pride in our blocking. We're not looking to dominate a defensive player because you can't dominate good defensive players. There's too much room around them. There's too much spacing. If you try to do too much in blocking a good defensive back, you're going to end up on the ground, you're going to end up whiffing. So what we really want to try to do is get ourselves in the most optimal position possible, okay? And then we want to try to mirror or position block that defender with some exceptions. There's opportunities to come down and draw good contact on defenders in certain run schemes, but for the most part, if I'm stalking a corner or if I'm going to push crack a force player or work across the field to cut off a safety, it's more about getting in their way, okay, similar to what you see here on the picture on top here on the slide, than it is trying to lay into a guy and decleat him. So first thing we got to do when we're blocking is we got to recognize the coverage, right? We got to understand, all right, who is the most dangerous man, all right? What kind of play are we trying to run? Is it an inside run? Is it an outside run? Is it a run away from me, okay? Where can I be best utilized in the blocking scheme to help us have a successful play here, all right? So understanding the coverage, understanding what the play is, obviously is job number one. Now, the next thing that I want my guys to do is I want them to simulate a pass, all right? If your body language and your style changes when it's a running play, it's too easy to pick up on. You're not going to be an effective blocker, okay? And not to mention the defender does not know it's run or pass. He's trying to determine that based on what he's seeing immediately post-snap. So what we want to try to do is simulate a good get-off just as if we were running a route. Okay, we want to incorporate route stems and aspects of the route tree that allow us to gain leverage and gain an advantage in beating a defender to a spot disguised as a route. All right, so it just takes a certain amount of practice and experience and perhaps football savvy for a guy to figure out, okay, how can I set this guy up so that when it's time to block him, I'm in a position where my body's between him and the ball carrier. Okay, and that's at least what we're striving for. You also want to buy yourself time before you have to engage, because if you engage too soon with the defender, you can't block a good defender for 5-6 seconds. It's just not going to happen, all right? And if it takes that long for the ball carrier to get up on your heels, then you're just not going to be able to hold that block that long. So we want to make sure that when we do engage, it's at the right time if we can help that. So back to something I wanted to point out here with regard to understanding coverage. So if it's man coverage, obviously, when at all possible, we just want to run the guy off, okay? Now, I think you have to run him off with a certain level of intensity that sells him on the fact that it may be a pass. If you come off lazily, he's going to peak. If he's a guy who peaks a lot, then hopefully we can take advantage of that in the passing game, okay? But in the event that it is a run and you know this guy peaks, there are some different techniques that we use to try to first sell a route, but then quickly adjust so that we're in a position and we don't leave our guy hanging. For instance, if we're swinging the ball out on the perimeter here to a back coming out in the backfield, we may not want to run the risk of just trying to run a guy off, because if he sees it early, he can come and do some damage. So one thing that we do, especially if the ball's coming into the boundary, is, all right, guys up in press, all right, but we know he likes to look in the backfield a lot. All right, so we may come to balance, bop, bop, bop. All right, double move. Okay, now we work to go fade, get his hips turned. Okay, then we sweep. All right, we'll swat. We rip back through as if we're running fade slant, and then we're in a position to wall him out near the sideline, create a running alley underneath us. Techniques like that, just being a smart football player, understanding how to set a guy up before it's time to block him, okay? Or if it's a situation where there's a defender that's playing off, if it's just a simple cover 3 corner, all right, taking that inside stem, pushing up hard, vertical, as if you're running a route, and then breaking down, okay? So I tell the guys, when you're blocking a defender that's playing off, close out the space, all right? Not so much so that you run by him or get olayed, okay? But close out the space, come to balance, all right? Wide base, and now we're incorporating a lot of the techniques that offensive linemen would be taught, okay? All right, we're playing with a good center of gravity, all right? Our chest is up. We're not trying to tee off on a guy. We don't want to lunge or lean, all right? Because we're going to get thrown to the ground or we're going to look foolish, all right? We want to sit down. Now it's all about position blocking, okay? So we're working our feet, buzzing the feet, all right? Zeroing in on the center of his chest, and now we're just mirroring him. And if he does commit hard to his side, then we can engage and let the back be a back and pick the right way to go, okay? So to get our numbers or to get good repetitions in, we'll get in trip sets, all right, with 3 defenders. We'll have a walked out outside backer and a safety over the top and a corner outside, or any combination of alignments there with those 3 guys with our trips receivers, and we'll block it a variety of different ways. We have some angle blocking and some other things that we'll do. We'll fold and cross block and do a variety of things that perhaps we could get into in a different session. But the point is you need to get to your spot, get to your landmark, all right, in a football savvy way, close out that space, break down, wide base, keep your chest up, and now we're mirroring and we're not engaging until it's time to engage. When we do engage, we want hands inside. We're out there for all the world to see, and so many great runs are called back because a receiver who can be seen very well out there in the middle of the field has his hands outside. I feel like this picture down here, I put it in here on the slide because I feel like this guy is running the risk of getting called for holding, because once that official sees your hands outside the framework of that defender's body, I think you're running a risk of getting called a holding penalty. Hands got to be inside, all right? If you can get a little bit of cloth, get it. But really, ideally, is making sure that your base is wide and you're playing from the feet up is far more important than doing anything to control a man with your hands. Obviously, we want to use our hands as much as possible, but more importantly, we want to make sure we're staying in front of him for as long as possible. I put technique in want to. I heard somebody say that once, and I believe that to be true. It doesn't matter what kind of receiver you are, how big, how small. One of our best receivers was our smallest receiver by height and weight, but he was ferocious as a blocker, and we would actually use him more often than other guys who had all the tools because he had great feet, he had great tenacity, he applied his technique the way we taught him, and he blocked to the echo of the whistle. And if you can get your guys to do that, you're going to be a very effective receiving core when it comes to blocking. Okay, so practicing and mindset. All right, so you hear the term practice like you play. I'm not sure every practice, unless truly emphasized, it operates that way. So with my guys, it starts with breaking the huddle. You normally have the furthest to go. You got to break the huddle and have a sense of urgency. We don't want the defense staring at our formation for 20 seconds because we're waiting for you to get lined up, checked in with the official, get your feet right, communicate with your fellow receiver on whatever adjustments you guys are making, so on and so forth. We break the huddle. We have a sense of urgency to the spot. We get lined up quick, okay? We start to process our assignment and our technique relative to what we see out there in the secondary and the roof line of the coverage, okay? And we're ready to play football, looking back in at the ball. See the ball snapped, good get off, some of these things I touched on earlier. Compete to the echo of the whistle. If you're on the backside of the throwing progression, that's no excuse not to run the heck out of your post route on the backside. Because number one, how will we ever know if we can come back to you on that later in the game? And number two, How do you keep the defense honest when you let up like that and you give them a chance to quickly look inside and see what's going on and then pursue the play? And number 3, if the ball does come back out the back door, then you're not in a position to help shield the guy off to help us go the distance. So every single assignment, no matter where you are on the field, every route, no matter what your job is relative to the design of the play is important. All right, so that's what I mean by competing to the echo of the whistle. All right, now as a coach, feedback after every snap. Okay, so I talked earlier about, all right, if a guy drops a ball, then we don't want to yell, catch the ball. We want to tell him what he didn't do, what he could have done better, how he could have made the most out of that opportunity. Even if it was an extremely difficult catch or set of circumstances, there's always something that you could probably tell the athlete that they can apply later to help further their chances of success if they're put in that situation again. When a guy catches a ball, all right, I want to use similar feedback. I want to tell him what he did right, why he made that catch, all right? I want to build his confidence by really emphasizing those things that that young man did well, all right, and trying to build on that. And make no mistake, the other receivers that are looking on, they're hearing this as well. So they're getting mental reps, all right, and they're getting the right kind of reinforcement because of what you are acknowledging that that receiver did. Lots of catches. So get your backup quarterbacks, get your other coaches that might not be as actively involved in that particular drill or 7-on-7 period or team period or whatever it is. And whatever a guy's doing, even if a guy's job is to stalk block a corner for a play, as he's making his way back to the huddle, I want to get him a ball. They cannot catch too many passes. I want to throw the ball as often as possible. I want to throw the ball high, low, lots of velocity, a touch. Maybe, you know, it's just a flip, all right? Try to catch them by surprise, all right? But something that'll add some life to practice and get them, I don't know what the magic number is for catching, but I know this, the more times these guys can get their hands on the ball, the better pass receivers are going to be. And guys that are on the backside of that route progression, like I mentioned earlier, get them a ball. Don't let them just run a route and not get their hands on a ball. Try to optimize that, even if you got kids who aren't quarterbacks. If they're, unless they're supposed to be actively involved with that particular part of practice, watching another position, whatever it takes to get everybody a ball on every rep, that should be the goal. How to handle a drop pass. So these things are important. A guy drops a ball, what happens? He gets mad, he yells, he kicks the ball, he hangs his head. No, we don't want any of that, all right? And as simple and as potentially cheesy as this may sound, I teach our guys, you drop a ball, you clap your hands, you say, dang, I'll get the next one, coach, and you sprint back to the huddle, all right? There's no time for getting down, feeling sorry for yourself, negatively impacting your confidence by dwelling on that situation. You clap your hands, say, I will get the next one, you sprint back to the huddle. It's just a simple concept, part of the culture, part of the mindset that we want our guys to have. We don't need them loafing back, getting a bunch of chatter from the opposing team or the opposing sideline. None of that's good for us. We want to focus on the next one, next play, mindset, very important. And then I mentioned this earlier, I heard Jimmy Johnson say this one time, receivers are often pretty boys, and they'll have a tendency to, try to get cute. Tell them, don't be cute, don't be pretty, be good, all right? So that goes back to catching the ball with two hands and not one. Don't get too preoccupied by trying to make a ooh-ah move on the guy in front of you while the pursuit is rapidly coming, okay? We want to make sure that we're doing things efficiently, all right? That we're protecting the football and that we're applying these fundamentals and techniques so we can be the best receivers that we can be. Last slide is just my contact information. The clinics that I've been to, coaches have always been very gracious with providing their contact information for anybody that wants to follow up, has questions. That's my cell phone, my personal email address. If there's anything that I can do to elaborate on some of the things that we talked about today, if there's specific questions that you have that you think maybe I can offer some insights on, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you for your time.